Hello everyone, we are ready for chapter 27 of the Treasure Hunter's Tale. I'm still not marvellous and I'm counting down the minutes before I can take my next painkiller. Just to give you a heads up. The next day, the two young men showed up, and Mr. Discover the Truth and Mr. Saved by Grace met with them and showed them the carved stone hearts. They explained how God could give them new hearts because of Jesus and his sacrifice. The young men listened intently and asked good, searching questions. When they left, they were both given a Bible and an invitation to come back to the lodging house whenever they pleased to ask questions or discuss something some more. The two treasure hunters were greatly encouraged by this and felt sure there must be more young men who would benefit from one-to-one or small group meetings, and they decided to discuss that further with Mr. Newhart when he and his wife returned. Freddie had spent the day with his grandmother, getting the house all clean and tidy, ready for his parents' return. Miss Poor in Spirit had shown him how to sew leaves together to make a natural kind of bunting, and Freddie had made a welcome poster. "I'm just writing welcome," explained Freddie to his grandmother as she looked over his shoulder. "Because this isn't really home, is it?" he said, looking up at her. "Because we don't all fit." Miss Poor in Spirit sighed. "No, Freddie," she said sadly. "You're right." She squeezed his shoulder and then walked off quietly into the garden. She picked up her watering can and started giving the flowers a drink, but I'm not sure how much they got, for she didn't notice the can was half empty. Truth be told, Miss Poor in Spirit was very focused on other things, namely, what would happen when the happy couple returned. Would they whisk Freddie away to his new home? She hadn't heard anything about them having one, but she couldn't shake the idea. Oh, but hadn't Mr. Newhart promised that his marrying her daughter wouldn't separate them? "Be still, Heart," she said out loud, "for you will know soon enough." She desperately wished they could just expand the house of bread somehow. It was so well situated and already had so many happy memories. "Stop it, old girl," she scolded herself. "You will make yourself cry, and that would not do." She straightened herself up. "That would not do at all. And don't you trust the dear, kind officer who knows your thoughts and your desires?" "And knows what's best for you too," said the officer's voice. Miss Poor in Spirit looked up, and there, leaning over the little picket fence that lined the garden, was the officer of the king, smiling lovingly upon her. "Can you, by worrying, change the events of the day?" he asked, looking at her kindly. "No, sir," confessed the old lady, "but I still do it. I am sorry." "You are right to be concerned," he said, "but that should lead you to prayer, not to anxiety and worry." Miss Poor in Spirit walked over to where he was standing, and he leant over the fence and gave her a big hug. "Thank you, sir," she sniffed. "You are right, of course. I know that whatever happens, your will always be done and be for the best." "And you truly believe that?" questioned the officer. "Yes," said Miss Poor in Spirit firmly. "I really do." "Well, then," said the officer. Just then there was a cry of joy from Freddie and a sound of distant cheering. Freddie came running out into the garden. "Oh, grandmother, they're coming, and I haven't put up my poster yet. Oh, please help me." "I'll help," said the officer. "Oh, hello, sir," said Freddie, jumping slightly, but then looking relieved to see his friend. "Thank you for coming." He held out the poster. "Oh, that's lovely, Freddie. Did you do that all by yourself?" he asked kindly. "Well, technically no," said Freddie. "You helped." The officer smiled at him. "In what way, Freddie?" he said, testing him. "Well, you gave me eyes to see and hands to hold the crayons and muscles to make my colouring bright and my brain to help me think what to write, and you made the paper and the crayons and you gave me breath and—" "Good answer," laughed the officer. "Well, let's go and put our poster up then, shall we?" Freddie smiled. "Yes, please," he said, and walked to the front of the house. The cheering that Miss Poor in Spirit had heard came from the townsfolk as the couple drove through the town towards the house of bread. They were all so glad to see them so happy and refreshed, and there was a lovely warm sense of belonging in the air. At last their cart pulled into view, and there were cheers and lots of waving. The cart stopped, and out they jumped. There were hugs all around, and the happy reunited family went into the house. Mr. Newhart gave Freddie a fatherly hug. "That was a lovely poster, Freddie, my boy. Thank you very much." "Father," said Freddie, "I didn't put welcome home because this isn't going to be our home, is it?" Freddie had always been very matter-of-fact and never thought it was a good use of time to skip around an issue, and Mr. Newhart admired him greatly for it. "Well, Freddie, that is something we need to discuss together," he said. "I think for the time being I will sleep in the lodging house because there really isn't room for me here, but we shall start hunting for a house to live in tomorrow." "Big enough for all of us?" asked Freddie seriously. Big enough and with room to spare, smiled Mr. Newhart. Including grandmother? Said Freddie, looking earnestly into his father's eyes. Of course, said his father, and anyone else who joins the family, he said, smiling at his wife. Freddie felt a lot more reassured by this, and so did Miss Poor-in-Spirit, who overheard. She looked over at the officer, who nodded at her. Including grandmother. What a comfort that was to her. And, no longer worrying, she busied herself getting the tea things ready. That night, Mr. Save-by-Grace and Mr. Discover-the-Truth joined the gathering and introduced Ears to Hear to the couple. Mr. Newhart was secretly very relieved to see that his friends had already found his replacement, as he wasn't sure how he was going to break the news to them that he wouldn't be hunting with them like the old days, but was feeling more and more called to become the pastor of the town. The next day he told them excitedly about the building they had scouted out for a church building, and as he spoke, Mr. Save-by-Grace and Mr. Discover-the-Truth's eyes got wider, but they didn't say anything. Instead, they agreed to be shown the building by the couple the next day. Later, when they were alone, they were discussing together. I think it might be the same place, said Mr. Discover-the-Truth. So do I, agreed Mr. Save-by-Grace. Well, all will be clear tomorrow, yawned Mr. Discover-the-Truth. That was actually a yawn. Freddie had almost forgotten about the big building and its potentially scary history. He had been so busy, what with climbing trees and stopping fights and preparing for his parents' return, and his father had already taken him fishing since they got back. However, as the group walked nearer and nearer, Freddie started to recognise where they were heading. He sensed that his parents were very excited to show this building, so instead of speaking out like he normally would, he walked softly to Mr. Discover-the-Truth and slipped his hand in his. Uncle, he whispered, are we going where I think we're going? Mr. Discover-the-Truth squeezed his hand. Yes, Freddie, I think so. Shall we tell Father and Mother about the document and the murder? I think not, Freddie. We are not 100% sure about that ourselves, so we had better not say anything just yet. Freddie nodded seriously. He liked being part of the treasure hunter band, and now having a secret that he knew with the hunters but not his parents was rather exciting and made him feel all grown up.